Earlier this week, a progressive challenger delivered yet another blow to the Democratic Party establishment. Abdul El-Sayed's victory over Haley Stevens to be the party's Senate nominee in Michigan is one of the highest profile victories for the ascendant US left in recent years. And it was the climax of a bitter primary campaign that exposed the deepening rifts in the Democratic Party over issues like economic populism, immigration, and perhaps most notably, Israel. So in this video, we're going to explain the so-called civil war in the Democratic Party, the ascendancy of the Democratic Socialist or Progressive wing, and what it means going forwards. Explore which world leaders are winning and which are losing every week with our podcast, the World Leader Leaderboard. Find it over on the TLDR podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. We can probably trace this current Democratic Party transformation back to 2016 and Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. Sanders, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats, put up an unexpectedly strong challenge against Hillary Clinton, who won the party's nomination, but lost the general election that November to Donald Trump. Sanders' progressive grassroots 2016 primary campaign helped elevate the left-wing cause and establish a campaign blueprint for a new generation of progressive candidates, focused on income and wealth inequality, universal healthcare, campaign finance reform, and more. 2 years later, in 2018, that new generation broke through. 4 young, vocal progressives known as the Squad, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar, challenged the Democratic establishment and were elected to the House of Representatives. Left-wing Democrats once again coalesced around Bernie Sanders' second presidential campaign in 2020. However, Joe Biden won the nomination and went on to beat Donald Trump at the general election, bolstering the Democratic establishment. But Trump's dramatic return in 2024, defeating Vice President Kamala Harris, fired up progressives in the Democratic Party and further eroded faith in Democratic leadership. The current electoral cycle since 2024 has seen an unprecedented breakthrough of left-wingers in the Democratic Party, advocating for things like Medicare for all, higher taxes on the wealthy, tackling inequality and affordability, and ending military aid to Israel. But their wider pitch is that, now, more than a decade into the Trump era, the party and country need something new, a radical shaking up of the Democratic Party's playbook that they say is clearly not fit for purpose. This recent breakthrough was kickstarted by Zoran Mamdani's remarkable victory over party heavyweight Andrew Cuomo in the 2025 New York City mayoral election, catapulting him to become one of the most influential Democrats in the country. Mamdani endorsed 3 fellow Democratic Socialists in New York congressional primaries in June this year. They secured a clean sweep, winning 1 open seat and toppling 2 incumbent Democratic congressmen. Elsewhere in the country, Democratic Socialist challengers have defeated other establishment Democrats. In Maine, left-wing populist Graham Plattner endured a seemingly endless series of scandals, but still managed to defeat Governor Janet Mills to become the state's Democratic Senate candidate. Plattner later dropped out in July amid sexual assault allegations and has been replaced by progressive former state lawmaker Troy Jackson, who's hoping to flip the must-win Senate seat. In June, Democratic Socialist Melat Kiros unseated 15-term Democratic incumbent Diana DeGette in Colorado's 1st congressional district to become the Democratic candidate. Progressive challengers have won open Democratic primaries in Pennsylvania's 3rd congressional district and Michigan's 7th. And in Michigan's 13th congressional district, Democratic Socialist Donovan McKinney defeated incumbent Democrat Sri Thenadar. However, it was Michigan's Senate primary that became the clearest microcosm of the wider Democratic Party civil war. It was expensive, messy, and at times ugly. Progressive former public health official Abdul El-Sayed emerged victorious this week, narrowly defeating Congresswoman Haley Stevens to become the Democratic nominee in the open must-win Senate seat. Like many other insurgent Democratic candidates, El-Sayed's platform was focused on getting big money out of politics, addressing the cost of living and implementing Medicare for all. But it was Israel that became the most prominent point of contention between him and Stevens. In fact, a candidate's position on Israel has become a sort of litmus test and an increasingly clear dividing line in Democratic politics. The rise of progressive challengers like El-Sayed, who accuse Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, call for ending US military aid to Israel, and refuse to accept money from the pro-Israel lobbying group AIPAC, reflect the dramatic shift in the Democratic base's attitude towards Israel. According to polling by Pew earlier this year, a staggering 80% of Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents have an unfavourable opinion of Israel, up from 69% in 2025 and 53% in 2022. Among Democrats under 50 years old, Israel is viewed even more unfavourably. Outside groups backing Stevens spent more than $60 million on advertising, with more than half of that coming from AIPAC. Stevens was also endorsed by the likes of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. El-Sayed, meanwhile, had a little more than $7 million spent in ad support, and the endorsement of high-profile progressives like Bernie Sanders and AOC, and overcame being vastly outspent by Stevens, something he managed to turn into an advantage by framing the race as the money against the many. El-Sayed's primary win is one of the highest profile victories for the ascendant left in recent years, but it now faces its biggest test in November, when he goes up against Republican former Congressman Mike Rogers for the Senate seat. For the left of the Democratic Party, an El-Sayed victory in November will be used as validation of their pitch, that left-wing economic populism, challenging the status quo, and opposing Israel are winning messages among the wider electorate in crucial battleground states. If he loses, though, it'll be held up by establishment Democrats as evidence that moderation is key, and that this brand of politics alienates more than it wins over. This midterm cycle has demonstrated that democratic socialists, or progressives more generally, are a rising force within the Democratic Party, and has caught the party establishment on the back foot. Socialism is no longer such a dirty word, with around a third of Democrats and Democrat-leaning adults identifying as democratic socialists, according to a recent CNN poll. But we shouldn't paint a picture of a totally dominant Democratic left, as moderate establishment-backed candidates have managed to hold off against progressive challengers elsewhere, including in House primaries in Missouri and Washington. The Democratic base is in fact split, and sometimes contradicts itself. Some remarkable polling for CNN last month found that 54% of Democrats or Democratic-leaning independents think moving to the left would change the party for the better. But 54% also said moving the party to the centre would change the party for the better, meaning some said yes to both. However, the same polling found that Democrats are much more united in thinking that replacing the party's leadership, taking a stronger stand against Trump, and nominating younger people for office would all change the party for the better. This year's midterms will be a key test for the Democrats' progressive wing in pitching themselves to the wider electorate. However, the struggle for influence will not end in November. Instead, it will intensify as we approach the Democratic primary for the 2028 presidential election, which will be defined by a battle over the party's future direction. The autumn issue of our magazine Too Long is now available for pre-order. The main story inside is all about the plan to fix Europe. From the economy and trade to politics and war, we discuss the various ways in which Europe could be reborn. Then there's the global section, which includes our interview with The Economist's Washington bureau chief about the state of America. There's also articles on the current state of US-China relations, as well as discussing the politics of disasters, the Pope's involvement in 21st century politics, and the death of the dollar. Our EU section includes the latest from the war in Ukraine, how Germany's rearmament could defend Europe, as well as stories from across the continent. Our UK section unpacks Britain's new Prime Minister, as well as the various rumbling issues from Brexit, some 10 years on, that still plagued Burnham. That's just some of the stories in this issue, with us also launching a brand new business section to go alongside the relaunch of TLDR Business YouTube channel later this month. If you're interested in hearing our takes on all of those topics, then you can get the very best deal by subscribing to Too Long. Subscribers get 20% off every issue as long as they're subscribed, but if you use code AUGUST26, you'll get an additional £3 off your first copy. Plus, if you want the most from TLDR, then you can also subscribe to Too Long and TLDR Party in one bundle, the cheapest way to get both subscriptions. Regardless, thank you so much for watching this video and for supporting TLDR.